programme, How to Prevent Heart Failure. A new campaign in the UK aims to educate people about how to spot a weakened heart. If diagnosed early enough, the condition can be treated, so we'll hear from our health correspondent about the warning signs. Welcome back to the News Hour on TRT World. A major campaign has been launched in the UK to raise awareness about heart failure. It's often confused with a heart attack, which is a different condition. Heart failure affects more than 64 million people globally, causing disability and possibly death. But if diagnosed early enough, it can be treated. Our health correspondent, Nicola Hill, reports.
A powerful film about heart failure, a disease that's often ignored or diagnosed too late.
What we're trying to achieve with this F-word campaign is getting patients to use the term, because often they will say they have a heart condition or there's something going on with the heart, but won't use the term heart failure because they're fearful of it.
This doctor and patient are discussing a campaign by the British Society for Heart Failure to raise awareness of the disease. Lawrence Humphreys-Davies had a heart attack 7 years ago, but despite subsequent ill health, heart failure wasn't diagnosed. Instead, he was treated for bronchitis.
My breathing was laboured. I was fighting for breath. I would bubble. It was like sort of breathing through chocolate arrow. And you could breathe, but you had to, yeah, you weren't gasping, but you were struggling. And I went to the doctor, and she very nice and very capable. And she said, oh, it's the bronchitis, we'll do this.
In fact, Lawrence had the obvious symptoms of heart failure. He changed doctors, had 6 further surgeries and a pacemaker fitted. Only then was he told what his condition was and that his heart wasn't pumping blood around the body effectively enough.
Patients who have heart failure symptoms, they may be filling up with fluid, they may have fatigue, they may have fluid retention, may not recognise that that's something to do with their heart. So unlike when someone may think they have cancer, somebody doesn't go to their doctor and say, I think I've got heart failure in the same way. And we want to get beyond that so that they think of this, go to their doctor and get that blood test.
And that's because the condition can be treated, but the earlier it's diagnosed, the better, as the correct treatment can improve symptoms and quality of life and enable patients to live longer. This campaign is a 5-year project to embed what is a serious but treatable disease into the consciousness of the public, policymakers and healthcare systems. Ultimately, the message is that it's not a failure to have heart failure, but to recognise the symptoms and to seek medical help.
Live to London and to speak to Nicola. So, Nicola, first of all, explain the difference here in simple terms between heart attack and heart failure.
I think, as you said before, Adnan, it is a confusing thing, isn't it? So basically, a heart attack is when a clot in your artery blocks the blood flow to the heart. It's sudden, it's painful, but if it's treated straight away, the clot's removed, someone's given a stent, angioplasty and medication, then it's sorted. Heart failure is insidious. It's something that just comes on where basically you're not pumping, the heart isn't pumping properly. That left ventricle of the heart that pumps blood around the body isn't working properly, and that's why people become very tired, they can't breathe properly, they're gasping for breath, as we heard Lawrence then in my report demonstrate how he was beforehand. And they have fluid retention. They might notice they've got very swollen ankles, and it's not because they've been standing all day long, it's because the fluid's pooling, because the blood is not being pumping around the body, and that's the difference between the two.
Has the campaign been launched for a particular reason at this time, or is it just part of the government's general healthcare obligations towards the people?
Well, it's actually been launched, as Claire Whelan really was saying there, is because there's a real lack of awareness of heart failure. You know, we know the symptoms of stroke, for example. If someone's possibly having a stroke, if they can't lift their arms up above their head, you need to dial 999, you know, immediately. But many people are misdiagnosed. I was talking to Dr. Simon Williams, who's the chair of the British Society for Heart Failure, and he was saying, you know, he's got patients aged between 18 and 100. So it's not just a disease of the elderly, although as you get older and your heart begins to fail, it isn't pumping as effectively, you can go into heart failure. But it is misdiagnosed. So, you know, we heard Lawrence's story then. I mean, that was shocking. It took years for his heart failure to be diagnosed. One other person that Dr. Williams was telling me about was diagnosed as an asthmatic and given an inhaler. And the reason it's so important to get this spotted earlier is that often it's only diagnosed at the moment when people end up in emergency in hospital. It can take a year to diagnose, but for a significant number of people with heart failure, they die between 2 to 5 years because of it. And they needn't. Advances in treatments are phenomenal. Dr. Williams said the past 30 years there's been many new medications available, all the way to perhaps having to have a pacemaker fitted, as Lawrence was given. And he said to me, his cardiologist has told me, as long as the batteries don't go, he's good for another 15 to 20 years. So this 5-year project, you know, it's our long-term project, is to make people aware of these symptoms. Don't be scared to talk about it. Be aware of being breathless, fatigued. You know, if you're fighting for breath, this is the F campaign, fighting for breath, fatigue, fluid retention. Go to your GP and say to them, look, is there a possibility I've got heart failure? Because there's a very simple test that can identify this. It's a simple blood test. And that's what this campaign is aiming to do, to make us all aware of it. As you know, the figures you read out there, 64 million people globally have heart failure, and they're not getting treatment because it's not being diagnosed often enough.
Nicola, thank you so much. Our health correspondent, Nicola Hill in London.